for walking us through a miniature version of what this weekend has been, moving us from death into life, from darkness into light. And if you're somebody who doesn't regularly attend our church, or you haven't been here in a few weeks and you're wondering why we have a Christmas tree up here, we have not lost our minds. This is the Lent tree, and each week our children's ministry has been decorating it with symbols of the season of Lent, and now it's all decorated with gold and with white, and a little bit later, they're making something today that they're going to bring in at the end of the service to decorate it. So we thank our children's ministry and Ann Masterson and all the folks that have made that happen. We have had such an amazing Lenten season and Holy Week. I want to thank our youth ministry and our children's ministry for all the things that they've done for us. Kaylee Mendelson, who put together our choir for children's choir for Palm Sunday, and Jess Poulin. Our egg hunt was really incredible, and Ann has been doing Sunday school. We've got so many folks. Our AV team has just stepped up and done a great job with all the lighting, and then our praise team. So let's just give everybody a hand. Thank you so much. So I'm betting that you've already had a busy morning, getting everybody ready, trying to get here, get yourself ready. And I heard about a woman she loved her church, and she just got so inspired. During Holy Week, she was participating in all the things that her church was offering, and she was so excited getting ready for Easter, and she was having conversations with people, and as she's talking to them, she says, you need to come to Easter lunch. Come to my house for Easter lunch. And it was just a moment of excitement. But suddenly she realized, she's like, how many people have I invited? And then she realized, like, how many of them said yes? And all of a sudden she's like, I've got all this lunch I've got to fix. So Easter Sunday comes, and she's in the kitchen, and she's just running around, and her little daughter's watching her the whole time, just kind of taking it in, and she's kind of talking under her breath. And so everybody comes, and finally the pastor comes, and she brings her husband. So they were kind of the last ones to get there. So everybody gathers around the table in the family area, she says, Pastor, would you return thanks for this Easter meal? And the pastor said, well, you know what, I thought I'd ask your daughter to pray. And so he looks at the little girl, and the little girl looks at her mom. She whispers to her mom, I don't know what to pray. And the mom said, it's okay, sweetie, just pray a prayer you've heard Mommy pray. And so they all bow our heads, and she says, good Lord, why did I invite all these people for lunch? So you may be in that good Lord place this morning, but that's a good prayer. That's a good prayer. I want to share with you a story that you may have heard before, but maybe not. The story of that Easter morning, and John tells it this way, John chapter 20. He says, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen that were lying there, but did not go in. And Simon Peter came along behind him, and he went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head, and the cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And they asked her, woman, why are you crying? They've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they've put him. And at this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not recognize that it was Jesus. And he asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned around and she cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. Would you pray with me, please? As ever, O God, when one of your servants stands to speak the loudest and the clearest to that servant. Amen. So have you ever had a great big dream and life just killed it? Have you ever aimed really high for something and just got shut down? Maybe it was something in school or something in sports or a career or a relationship or retirement, and you were dreaming, you were going for the stars, and somehow circumstances just changed. People let you down. Or you let yourself down. And just like that, the life that you're living isn't at all the life that you had hoped for. Wow, Pastor Brian, happy Easter. Yeah, hey, Brian, we showed up for bunnies and chicks. We got on new clothes here. Now you're throwing all this darkness our way. What is up with that? I don't want you to hear the rest of the story until you're willing to recognize that the most glorious truth of Easter Sunday isn't found in how the story begins, but how it ends. And you can't truly have that glorious light at the end unless you begin with the dark despair at the beginning, because it is real. So I just read to you from the 20th chapter of John's Gospel. And as John's telling the story, look where it starts. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb. So grab hold of the fact that because of Easter, darkness leads to light. Do you believe that? You see, church, if we don't begin Easter in darkness, then we can never understand how amazing it is to live in the light. Now, there are all kinds of stories and myths and legends about who exactly this Mary was. What we know from reading the scriptures is that she was a woman from a small village called Magdala on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And at some point in her life, she has an encounter with Jesus, and he heals her of 7 demons that were living inside of her. And she becomes one of his key female followers, a supporter of his life and his ministry. You see, Jesus had taken her from a life of darkness and offered her the option of choosing light. So Mary runs on that Easter morning to tell the apostles that the tomb is empty. And Peter and John, they don't just believe her, they actually race one another to go back to the tomb where she had been. Now, Mary follows them, but she's slower. Maybe it's because she's so disoriented with everything that she's been experiencing, or maybe it's just because it's still dark outside. But by the time she gets to the tomb, the two of them have already come and gone. Now, when she gets there, the tomb is just as it was when she had been there earlier. It's open, but it's still dark, and it's still empty. And all Mary can do in the face of darkness and emptiness and confusion is to just cry. So she stands there crying all alone, wondering where her light has gone and where will light ever come from again in her life. And then suddenly she encounters this man that she doesn't recognize. And he asks her two questions. Woman, why are you crying? Why are you crying? Like he really cares. And who is it that you're looking for? Did you happen to notice how Mary answers the question? They've taken Jesus' body. He was buried here. Now he's gone. They've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they've put him. Her teacher, her Savior, the one who had given her life back, the one who had become her light, the one who had convinced her that there was a reason to hope, had been taken. They've taken my hope away. And I want to know where it's gone. So have you ever been there? Have you ever had your hope taken away? Have you ever been encircled with darkness and wondered how your life got so dark all of a sudden? Well, my friends, darkness in life is real. Don't ever let anyone tell you any different. The darkness is real. But the story isn't over. Amen. You see, because of Easter, darkness leads to light. And because of Easter, hope is real. So what is hope? Pretty common word. But we have to know what something is if we're going to decide whether or not we believe in it. Now, is hope just wishful thinking? Is hope just naive optimism? Like, hey, I hope this sermon doesn't go too long. That's just wishful thinking. Talk about naive optimism. Everybody that's here regularly is like, no chance of that. The dictionary definition of hope is a desire with the expectation of fulfillment. A desire with the expectation of fulfillment. You see, so hope begins with a desire for something good, and then it adds the element of expectation, of confidence, of belief. If we have a desire, but we have no sense of expectation, then all we're doing is wishing. And with all apologies to Walt Disney and Jiminy Cricket, who spend their time wishing on stars, wishes don't really come true all that often. But there's hope. When we have a hope in something, we're counting on it. Hope is more than a word. Hope is to the human spirit what oxygen is to the human body. Think about other places in life when a sports team loses hope, the game is often over. And when investors lose hope, the stock market tumbles. And when a patient loses hope, death can often knock at the door. Now, I've spent all of this time defining hope because on that lonely, dark morning, Mary believed that she had no reason to hope. She may have had some wishes left, but she thought hope was gone. I mean, she's already been to Jesus' tomb once. She heard the angel say he's risen, but she's not buying it. She watched him die. She saw him laid to rest. As far as she's concerned, in her mind, it's pretty much over. Seeing an empty tomb is still a long way from seeing resurrection. She's not there yet. Mary does what a lot of us do, almost all of us do, when we stand in front of a new tomb. We just cry. My friends, emptiness is real, just like darkness is real. Don't ever let anyone tell you any different. The emptiness is real, but the story isn't over. You see, because of Easter, darkness leads to light, and because of Easter, there is hope. And because of Easter, that hope can be shared. Mary doesn't recognize Jesus at first. Maybe it was the tears. Maybe it was the darkness. I choose to believe it was because Jesus had been radiantly transformed. But for whatever reason, she still can't see him for who he truly is. She sees a stranger who asks her questions. Woman, why are you crying? Imagine that. The first recorded words of the resurrected Jesus take the form of a question of care for a person that's hurting. He comes into the presence of a person that's hurting and asks a question because he cares. Jesus doesn't say, "Ta-da! Mary, it's me." He doesn't say, "Stop crying. It's all good." He doesn't scold her for a lack of faith. He meets Mary right where she is. He meets her in the darkness and the loneliness, and he asks her to tell him about it. Tell me why you're crying. Tell me where the hurt is. He asks her gently. He asks her lovingly. He asks her personally. He speaks hope into her life by simply taking the time to ask the question. And the hope that he breathes into her life, he does with just one word. One word changes everything. Mary. Mary. You see, church, there's something about hearing her name said by someone who loved her, someone who had invested in her, someone who had crossed heaven and earth for her, that convinced her that darkness and loneliness, they don't last forever. that her hope was real, and she needed to grab hold of it again. So my friends, have you ever allowed Jesus to meet you in the midst of your loneliness and your darkness and your emptiness? Have you ever been willing to be honest with Jesus and tell him about your fears, your despair? Because of Jesus, hope can come to where you are. I want you to take the time to notice all of the evidence that hadn't convinced Mary that resurrection was real. There was the empty tomb. It wasn't enough. There were the first words of an angel. It wasn't enough. There was confirmation from Peter and from John, and it wasn't enough. So if you've come here this morning because you're struggling with resurrection, as Pastor Patino said a little bit earlier, we are so glad that you're here. If you're looking for evidence, there's plenty. And we talk about it around here a lot. There really is an empty tomb. And there really are words that are written down, written records, both biblical and non-biblical. There really were transformed lives for people like Jesus' disciples and followers. There really was a brand new faith that burst forth around the teachings of this single Jewish rabbi. There really is a marker right in the center of human history, BC and AD. And there really are people sitting right here in this room who will talk about their own changed lives. Even if evidence were enough to bring you here, it'll never be enough to hold you here. What you need isn't evidence. What you need is Jesus. What Mary needed wasn't evidence. She needed an encounter with Jesus. And she knew that she'd found it with just a single word. That's what every one of us who's gathered here this morning needs as well. We need an encounter with the who of hope, and that is Jesus. You need a relationship with the who of hope. That's what Jesus offered Mary on that dark Easter morning. Suddenly, there he was, right in front of her, more real, more powerful, more glorious than she'd ever known him to be. He had proven that he was stronger than death, stronger than evil, stronger than all the bad things that can happen in the world. You see, guys, hope is not a what, and it's not a when, and it's not a why. Hope is a who. Amen. Sound like Dr. Seuss, don't I? Hope is a who, and that who is Jesus Christ. He is risen. He is risen indeed. And so what I want to know from you today is, who are you going to share hope with? And that's the truth.